It's the last week of May, so let's make sure you get your seedlings right.
Oh, Pittsburgh soil.
Hello. Welcome back to Pittsburgh Home Garden, where today I want to talk to the beginners. I want to talk to the people who are maybe getting into their first real summer season. They may have bought a couple plants, but they really bought a ton of seed packets because they really want to get their hands dirty. This video is for you. I'm going to make sure that you are able to kickstart your summer off with great seedlings and sowings. The way that I sow is mainly based on seed type and size, and I am going to show you how I do that so your results can resemble mine. So let's go ahead and throw it inside because it is way too windy out here. All right, so we are in the sunroom, and full disclosure, it is the Saturday right before June. I tell you that because through this process, I plan on showing you how not only to speed up germination process, but almost guarantee 95% of germination if everything goes right. Now, there are certainly tons of different methods of germination, but I'm going to show you what I do to get the results that I have. So first, we're going to talk about our very small seeds, and these generally are your brassica seeds and things like your tomatoes and peppers. Oddly, as soon as you take these out of the pack, you'll be amazed about how small they actually are. So with these, your very tiny seeds, you want to go ahead and surface sow them, meaning in your seed trays, you're going to put them barely underneath the soil. Actually, to stay safe, I put them directly on the soil and then just sprinkle some other soil on top. But I'm going to show you exactly how I do that. So the key to surface sowing your seeds is doing just as the name says. You want to go ahead and lay these very tiny baby seeds right on the surface of your soil. Now, you're doing this mainly because you don't want the seed to waste energy trying to push up through the soil. They're so small that they'll never make it. So you're really doing them a favor by surface sowing. And then once you have them in their trays, you go ahead and just sprinkle a little bit of dust on top. That's to make sure that all the seeds are actually getting a nice true connection with the soil once you're watering them. Also, I want to bring up the misconception of trying to get one seed per tray. It's almost impossible, unless you're using something mechanically. These are very tiny. So if you get 3 or 4 in one seed tray, don't even worry about it. It's the survival of the fittest. The strongest certainly will survive. I also would like to point out that not all brassica seeds are created equally. Things like your Swiss chard are actually pretty large as a seed. So with these, you don't need to worry so much about surface sowing. You can divot a little hole inside of your tray and dip those in. These can sit a little bit deeper because they are a larger seed. They have a bit more energy to push through that soil as needed. Next on your absolutely surface sow list are things like your peppers and tomatoes. These seeds are surprisingly light and small, and they will not push through the soil if you bury them down too deeply inside. So as you can see, I'm actually using a larger cell tray for these tomatoes because I want to be able to leave these tomatoes in there a bit longer. And before we move on, a very quick word from today's sponsor. Do you like gardening? Are there children in or around your life? Do you want to help introduce the wonders of gardening to those young impressionable minds? If you said yes to all three, then maybe consider buying my children's coloring book, ABCs in the Garden. My wonderful little children's book is actually filled with over 32 pages of coloring goodness for any child that's around your life. Packed to the brim with educational content and double page layouts, this is the type of book that you can actually participate with the child who is coloring by teaching them about the garden, different vegetables in the garden. This book has been a passion project for me, and I would just like to say thank you to all the folks who have sent me pictures of the young ones in their lives actually coloring and scribbling and learning. Thank you so much for your support. And if you would like to purchase a copy of ABCs in the Garden, please check the Amazon link below and it should queue you right on up. Thank you. Now back to the gardening. So, of course, the next step after you have surface sown your very tiny, tiny seeds is to actually water the tray and label it. You make sure you label because you will forget. I've been doing this for a bit of time and I forget all the time. So make sure you label, number one. Number two, go ahead and take your tray and you want to water from underneath. Now, this is absolutely key almost for every plant. You know, in general, this is very good practice, watering from underneath, but especially for your surface sown seeds, because all of the seeds are directly on top of the soil. If you go ahead and pour a jug of water, a sprinkler of water, or whatever on top, it's going to wash out all of these seeds and they are going to be misplaced everywhere. They might even slide off the side of the tray. So you want to make sure you have, 3 or 4 of these kind of like watering trays around. It's really best. I have like 2 outside, 2 inside. Helps me out a lot. And when you put your tray in there, you might want to stretch out the sides, make sure the tray is sitting as flat as possible, and give this maybe, 5 to 10 minutes. If your soil is very loose and doesn't have like large chunks, it should be very porous and very accepting. So we're going to go ahead and let these trays water in as we talk about the next sowing method. All right, so this next method is actually a little bit more specified to very few plants, but if you love them, this could be a very helpful tip. If you love growing tons of onions, tons of basil, and a lot of nasturtiums, you can go ahead and just put them in a cup. Now, you can actually do this with a ton of different plants. I will link a video above or below to where I did a ton of experiments. I basically planted out my entire early garden using just the cup method. But specifically with these 3 plants, their roots are very untangleable. They just don't seem to get tangled amongst each other as much as any other plants were. They're very like straight and they are very tough. You can be very rough with these roots and not actually disturb your plant. So it is as easy as it seems. You go ahead and get a nice cup of soil and just dump the entire seed bag in there. It is not going to disrupt a thing. And afterwards, you can go ahead and water from the bottom just as we did with the regular seed trays. So the next type of germination method that I like to use is what I call the absolute soaking method. It is exactly as it sounds, and it is usually reserved for seeds that have very hard shells or that are incredibly dehydrated. Now, you can look up things online that'll tell you to probably soak most things, but as you continue to garden, you'll start to notice that not everything does well being wet so early in the process, because it still has to go inside of wet soil and it still has to do that. And a lot of times you can end up with like rotting seeds, which of course nobody wants. But there are some very specific seeds that absolutely need a nice overnight soak. So number one, I like to use my corn. I have some red corn in here, and with my sweet corn, I just take the entire packet and I dump it right on in. I had so much trouble germinating corn because I would find that the seed would actually get really soft and start to rot out. So now I soak them overnight, and then when I place it into the soil, I actually place them with the bottom tip pointing down and they're not fully submerged. The next thing I like to soak is my spinach, because spinach for me is just a rough germination. Now this is something that I probably only get like 75% germination if I'm being truthful and honest with you. Not my proudest thing, but it's one of those fucking plants. Next thing on the absolute soaker list are my peas. These are always a difficult germination because just like the corn, they tend to get very soft on me prematurely. So I find that with this nice little pre-soak, it gets the seed primed and ready to go inside the soil, which I only need to water maybe once. And then once I follow the next step, I go ahead and get my germination. And of course, a perfect example of a very hard shell seed are the bitter melon. For those of you who have been a fan of the channel since last summer, you can remember the incredible bitter melon haul that your boy got in the greenhouse. And it all starts with cracking this hard seed outer layer. If you don't crack the seed a little bit, it will take literal weeks and weeks for this thing to soak up enough water so it can actually start its germination. And last but certainly not least, my favorite type of sowing method is actually using a plastic bag and paper towel. Now, this is toilet paper because I'm a single man who lives alone, so I don't have paper towels, whatever. But this method here is absolutely 100% guaranteeing you a germination, and it's going to happen super fast. And it's mainly because all of these seeds that I put in my bags are actually huge. Now, this is purely size based, but you're going to come across very, very big seeds, especially compared to like your brassicas that you can like barely see, or like your lemongrass, which is, you know, microscopic damn near. These seeds here, all of them, your melons, your cucumbers, your squashes, your okra, your beans, are absolutely humongous compared to the majority of seeds, to be honest. So that is why they do absolutely best in the bag. This bag becomes a mini greenhouse for them, which allows for very, very fast germination. So let me show you how to properly set this up so that you don't end up rotting out your seeds with too much moisture. So this very easy, almost childish method comes down to two factors: your moisture and your heat. And you have to remember that your heat is going to drive more moisture inside one of these bags due to condensation. So you want to take your paper towel or your toilet paper roll, if you have to use it. Go ahead and rip off a nice little chunk, dip it in the water, get it nice and saturated, and then you want to wring this thing out. Now, you're probably going to think that you're going to want to save more moisture than what you absolutely are going to want to, but I promise you're going to want to wring it out to where, you know, you give it a nice squeeze and you still get a little bit of drops. It's not completely dry, but it's not absolutely soaking, because once you put this in the bag, it shouldn't leave the bag. Now, of course, once you've gotten your napkin or piece of toilet paper nice and damp, you want to go ahead and set your seeds in the bags. Now, what I like to do is if I have 3 types of different melons, I generally go ahead and sow them the same. I am certainly going to be able to tell the difference between the watermelon and the cantaloupe seed. I do the same thing with my beans. I have several different types of squashes. I just make sure that I get my labeling right, because for me, it's not truly about what variety it is as much as it is what species is this. I know that my watermelons need tons of space, so they're going to go somewhere different than what my squash may need. Also, when you are putting your seeds inside the bag, you want to make sure that you press down on the actual bag to make sure the seeds are having as much contact with that paper towel as absolutely possible, because these are now about to go through an intense cycle of heat and condensation. So you want to make sure that you have decent space between your seeds, you know, enough to where the taproot won't run into someone else's taproot. And that's about it. All right, so the next step in all of the seedlings' lives actually is going to the heat mat, but it all happens at very different times. For my service sown seeds, I like to wait about 2 days. I like to let the soil dry out just a little bit, because oversaturated soil plus warmth from the heat mat actually can cause a bit of fungus that grows on top of the soil. That green kind of fungus that you see sometimes, that's due to over moisture plus overheat. So I like to let the service sown trays dry out for about 2 days before I set them on here. The seeds that have been sown in different cups, I actually give them only about 1 day, because the bottom half is so much more wet than the top half that when you place it on the heat mat, the moisture actually starts to rise because it's beginning to evaporate, which then affects your seeds and makes them germinate. So I like to let my cups get probably soaked about halfway before giving them a day and then setting them on the heat mat. And for all of the seeds that went into the damp baggies, I like to get these on the seed tray immediately because these are very fast germinators. The faster you could get them on heat, the actual better. And I don't know if I even said this, but this heat mat is underneath a nice plastic tray because the plastic tray helps disperse the heat instead of keeping it just inside that little block that actually is the heat mat. So I'm going to go ahead and move everything out of the way. And I'm going to put these bags that are about half closed and half open. You want to leave one side just a bit open because you don't want these things to really drown out, especially if you're not going to see them very early in the morning. So with the bags half open, I go ahead and set them directly on the heat mat, making sure to actually have the towel on the heat mat touching. This is going to drive so much heat. I almost can guarantee in 20-30 minutes, these bags will immediately be sweaty with condensation. All right, so it is a beautifully brisk Monday morning here in beautiful Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, meaning it has been 2 days since you have set up all your brand new seedling babies. And the one thing that will immediately stick out is the fast growth of all of your bagged seeds. I mean, within 2 days, I have hibiscus, cucumber, okra, squash, melons, and my beans already germinated and completely ready to be put into the soil. This is one way to basically guarantee 100% germination because you already see that it is living and it is trying to actually put out growth. Now for your surface sown seeds, for the more seasoned gardeners, you'll be able to notice that the seeds that have just sitting on the surface have already become a bit more plump, meaning they are ready to get on the heat mat so they can start their full life cycle. Also, everything that you have sown in your cups are ready for the heat mat at this point because the water in the soil has actually had time to settle down. It's not like fully saturated. There's been time for a little bit of drainage at the bottom. There's been a little bit of airflow if you have a fan around. And now that the soil might be, 75% moist, it's ready for the heat mat and it won't produce a ton of that like soil green fungusy growth because again, that comes from too much humidity and too much moisture at the same time. So the main thing you need to do at this point is get your bagged seedlings, the ones that have all popped. Not all seedlings will produce at the same rate. Now, all of my hibiscus seeds have certainly put out their roots, but that's not necessarily the same case for all of the melon seeds. All of my cantaloupes may have put out their little baby roots, but none of the rattlesnake watermelon has done that. So you want to just leave it in the bag and put it right back on the heat mat, but maybe do it in more incremental times. Maybe in the morning you put it on, take it off at night, because these things are primed. And if you leave it on the heat mat too long, you're going to get a ton of fungusy growth because again, too much heat and too much moisture. All this condensation in the bag is going to drench that paper towel or piece of toilet paper that you're using. So now, of course, the focus is putting your bagged seeds, the ones that have already put out their stems, into the proper seed trails. Now, these are obviously fast growers, right? It's been 2 days, they're ready to come out. So you want to put them in bigger trays. I'm using the 4-inch trays. You can also use like the big blocky trays. I tend to use these for my melons just because they are so big when they first start off. In fact, they're so big that you may think they're ready for the ground immediately, but until you see that second set of leaves, I honestly wouldn't put them in the ground. They just grow super big before that point. So when taking any of your bag seedlings, you want to make sure that you create a little divot and then you put this right in there and just go ahead and sprinkle soil on top. It's really nothing major. So, by following the steps that I personally use, hopefully you should see an increase in your germination rate, just like I do, to where you're almost getting 100% germination and damn near every seed sale tray that you have. You're producing more food, you're saving time because you're taking out all of the guessing that goes on with seeds. Now, once they start growing, there's certainly still work to be done. You still have to make sure that you stay up on your watering. Make sure the watering doesn't actually start to like soak the growing plant, because when that happens, you could get things like this to where the bottom of your plant actually starts to whittle off because it's just a little bit too wet. So you certainly want to monitor, the rate in which you're watering and putting on the heat mat, because the adverse effect is sometimes the heat mat can dry your babies out. And if you don't catch them in time, these withering plants will die. They're still very young. And even though, your big C's like your melons, they look grown, they are nothing but teenagers, pretty much. So you definitely want to make sure, you following the proper steps and just keeping an eye, every other day. Just go down there, take in the surroundings, really check it out. With your soaker seeds, you want to go ahead and just follow the steps that we have already established. The bigger seeds, can go down a little bit deeper. Your smaller seeds, like your spinach, you might want to layer just on top. But that's pretty much it. Seedlings are very sensitive, and sowing is something that you'll get better at the more that you garden. So for any beginner out there, or for any novice out there, I hope that I have, taught you a little bit of tips, a couple tips, a couple tricks, a couple this, a couple that, But as always, I want to thank you for watching Pittsburgh Home Garden. It's going to be a wonderful summer. And until next time, I'll be here gardening.